and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, everyone, welcome back to Nets in the Water. My name is John Barreto. We're just trying to stoke the flame of Catholic education, bring on people who are movers and shakers in the world of Catholic education and formation. And there's probably no better person to have on than Alessandro. Thank you so much for coming on, first off. Co-founder of Hallow, crazy spiritual journey, life, and passion for formation and education of all Catholics, but particularly lately you're launching to schools and kind of that realm of things.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. It's super exciting to be here. I don't know that I can live up to that very hype-filled intro, but we'll try and not make it be the worst part of anyone's week.
No, I think you'd be hard-pressed to do that. Yeah, you were telling us a bit of your story last night. Extremely interesting, very passionate, driven guy. But I'd love to hear it straight from you, kind of give a little breakdown. Who are you? How did you get to where you are? And then kind of pivot into, like, how did Hallow get founded? I'm sure, pretty much every Catholic with a phone knows what Hallow is at this point. So, yeah, very
praise be to God. Hopefully we can reach a few more people. And I'm told your mom loves this podcast, so shout out to Mom first and foremost.
Yeah, thank you, Mom, for listening. Yeah, they love the episodes.
Amazing.
My mom loves when my dad listens.
I'm happy to share a little bit of my personal background. We can jump into Hallow. So as we were talking about, I grew up in central Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Big Italian family on both sides. My mom was born and raised in Italy, came over as a teenager. When I was born, my grandparents, her parents moved in, and they never learned English, so grew up with Italian in the house. My dad, also Italian, his grandfather came over a few generations back. Within probably 5 or 7 miles, had a couple dozen cousins on both sides. On my mom's side, my mom, aunts, and uncles ran a few pizza shops in the area. My dad and uncle, who's also my neighbor, and cousins ran a construction company that my grandfather started. And so just a really amazing childhood. I grew up Italian Catholic. Sometimes in that order is the joke that I always say. But that meant Catholic grade school and high school, and then ultimately, somewhat accidentally, college. So I'm wearing
there you go.
Notre Dame polo. I did not want to go to Notre Dame, but I wanted to stay on the East Coast for college. I didn't want to go to Indiana, but the Catholic nuns at my high school made me apply, as well as the bishop of the Diocese of Fort Wayne South Bend was a priest in our area growing up, and he got transferred, and he said, you got to at least apply. So shout out Bishop Rhodes. And miraculously got in, and so ended up going there. Never had a falling away experience throughout any of my early or young adult life, but I gravitated much more towards the intellectual or academic experience of theology more than actually building a spiritual life or a prayer life. And so, did well on all the tests. I took Aquinas as my confirmation saint along the way and was really into the Summa and Thomistic thought. But I missed the most important part, arguably, of all of theology, which is a personal relationship with God. Yeah. And so where I ended up as a result of that was, I felt like I checked the box of like knowing about God in the sense of I could pass all the tests. But then like what I wanted to do in my life or career or otherwise was mine to figure out. And so while at Notre Dame, tried a bunch of different things, ultimately caught the finance bug and started a career on Wall Street in New York at a big investment bank, and then ultimately as an investor, private equity investor, and was working really hard, making a bunch of money, and that's what I thought I was going to do for the next 15, 20 years, retire by 40, 45, and just have a really comfortable life.
Yes, right into the sunset.
Exactly. Now it was, very, and we'll talk, I'm sure, a little bit more about this, but, it was a hard, choice to make. It was like you had to work really hard, but,
yeah, I'm sure.
A path towards success and already at a young age had a lot of it. So that's kind of where I was, kind of my mid-20s. Hallow does not exist because we sat down and tried to come up with a really great idea or business plan or something like that. It was very much the unexpected result of kind of a couple unexpected turns that each of our spiritual lives took in our mid-20s. So I'm one of 3 co-founders, founding team of 6 friends that went to school together and went into very different career paths. So as I mentioned, I was in finance. Some of the other guys were in consulting, government service, marketing, and one went to the seminary. And, we're catching up on the weekends as friends. And we realized there's one of 2 really big sets of issues that we were going through. My version of the one problem, one of the 2, was the working 7 days a week, super stressed, have a life that was dominated by a constantly never-ending email inbox, and then in between that, constant scrolling on pre-TikTok, so it was Instagram and YouTube, and was just super stressed. My then best friend, now co-founder Alex, had gotten really into secular mindfulness meditation using an app called Headspace, and he looked at me and said, "Hey, you don't look so good. You should really try meditation." And I was not familiar at all with meditation at this point. And I said, if I can fix my life in 10 minutes a day, then sign me up. And this was, a lot of the meditation apps were really becoming in vogue at this time. Calm, Headspace, 10% Happier. Sam Harris just had launched a meditation app. And so it was, kind of something people were doing. So I said, sure. And I didn't really think about this at all as a spiritual question. It was very physiological. I was having some health issues from working all the time and not sleeping. And so it felt like a very almost medical type thing, not a spiritual thing. And so I would describe the experience is that I started doing mindfulness meditation for 10 minutes a day for 4 or 5 weeks. And the way that it felt was good at the physiological level. So you sit still, you breathe deeply, that your blood pressure is going to go
body.
down.
Yeah.
Those are good things. But one, there's some real spiritual dangers of such a inward approach,
totally.
Which I'm happy to talk about, and comes up actually a lot in schools with this whole should Catholic schools do mindfulness, that kind of stuff. But I didn't know any of that at the time, and but practically for me, as soon as I created those 10 minutes of basically silence and doing breathing exercises, all of these, what I would now call small V vocational questions, started to pop up in that space. And what are you doing with your life? Do you ever stop to think not what you want, but what God might be calling you to do? And that was a big, scary set of questions that I didn't really know how to answer. And we were talking about this yesterday. I did the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. And took all of those big, scary questions, threw them in the closet, slammed the door, locked it, ran away, just went back to working all of the time. And so just ran away basically from the problems, which I'm sure is not an uncommon thing for people.
Yeah, it's the classic.
Yeah. So that's where I was. A big problem of stress and anxiety and trying to run away from really solving those at a core place.
Totally.
The other half of the group, including Alex, who had fallen away from their faith, were wrestling with some of the big questions of is God real? And so he was preparing to marry his now wife, Megan, and they were going through pre-Cana, marriage prep classes. And, being a relatively analytical guy, was asking okay, if I'm going to jump through all these hoops to get married in the church and say all these things about what I believe and commit to raising children, in the church, I might as well figure out, do I actually believe in God or not? Which is a, solid thought. So he, started on YouTube, searching around, found some people like Bishop Barron, Father Mike Schmitz, and others. I was kind of energized again, but then you would find some other people like Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins, kind of new atheism, and kind of bouncing back and forth. But he kept coming back to this idea that growing up, he was always told that you could talk to this guy, meaning God. And if you can have a personal relationship with him, then he must be real. So why don't I do that instead? Yeah. And so he took a step back and said, all right, God, I'm going to try and talk to you every day for 2 years. If you want me to know you're there, this is your window. I'm listening. Now, we're not supposed to put God to terms, and there's a lot of pride in that demand of God, but it was not, as we were talking about, a short window. It was a long.
That's a good window. I feel like I've heard some 2-week, 2-monthers, and it's at least it's 2 years. 2 years
it was
is solid.
a pretty sizable life commitment.
Yeah.
Which reflected, the importance of the question. But he didn't even know how to start that conversation. So he called a former rector of ours from college, Holy Cross priest, and said, hey, FP, quick question. I love meditation. I've been doing it every day for 4 or 5 years, but I'm looking for something Catholic to see if God's real. Any chance we got something in the middle of those two things that connects that? And Father Pete just laughed out loud on the phone and said, well, Alex, I don't know how many classes you slept through while you were here at college, but we've been doing this for over 2,000 years. It's called prayer, and you should really know how to do that. So he said, great, where do I get started? Pointed him in the direction of Lectio Divina, meditating on Scripture, which I know you guys know all about and are great at leading. But Alex had never heard of Lectio Divina before. And so he Googled, how to do Lectio Divina, 4 steps, took his now wife's Bible off the shelf, opens to a random page, grabs a paragraph, happens to be the Gospel of Luke, Sermon on the Mount, where the disciples ask, Lord, how should we pray? He's like, oh, That's interesting. The answer, of course, is the Lord's Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And the word that jumped out to meditate on was hallow, from hallowed be thy name.
Mm.
Obviously ends up becoming the name of what we're doing. But in that moment, felt God's overwhelming presence, broke down into tears, had this deeply kind of contemplative experience on the word hallow, to make holy, right, is what hallow means. It's like, is God trying to make my life holy? Am I letting him? Am I supposed to be trying to help make other people holy? And just had this deep kind of conversion of heart, and had this desire enkindled to try and figure out how to basically love God back from this overwhelming sense of love he received in that moment. Went on Amazon, bought a bunch of books on the church's kind of spiritual masters, many of the mystic saints, St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, Ignatius, and others, and just started to really figure out, like, how does one pray? What are these different ways of praying? A couple weeks later, he showed up at my house on a Sunday night. As the Italian of the group, I would host Sunday dinners occasionally for the friend group.
Doing your job.
There,
Perfect.
Gotta be fed. We gotta break bread.
Yeah.
So he sits down and says, I'll never forget, hey, you're a Catholic. I've got some questions. And we end up having this long conversation. And rather than, like, these questions about, like, what is the 10th commandment, or, like, what is, the rules of the catechism, he started asking me, like, how did you learn how to pray? When's the last time you learned a new way to pray? What does your prayer life look like today? Do you know this method? Do you know that method? Like, how do you talk to God, discernment of spirits type stuff? And I didn't know half the stuff he was talking about, despite being a self-proclaimed, like, well-educated Catholic.
Yeah.
And he's like, you really got to try this out. Now I'm looking across the table, like my best friend, we're best men in each other's weddings, and he's clearly coming alive in a really real way in his spiritual life. He's like, you got to do this stuff. And so I was like, sure, I'll do this with you. So I started doing Lectio in the morning, the examen in the evening as a starting point. And, we basically started to build a prayer life. Eric, our third co-founder, who was working with Alex, also a Notre Dame guy, Alex and him started talking at work. We're starting to send each other, bringing in the friend group, because some of our friends, the one went to the seminary, others had studied theology, and we start sending each other, books and blogs, and basically just like, hey, this, like, prayer method really was cool and worked for me. Not your, like, typical email chain for, some people in their mid-20s working in different cities, but it was, really impactful to us. Over the course of a couple months, we started to think, wouldn't it be awesome if, instead of buying all these books, reading all these blogs, we could be guided in the same audio guided way that, Headspace had done for us in kind of the secular meditation realm, but for prayer. And so Alex took the lead, having been a mechanical engineer at school, knew some coding, coded a super simple play pause button. We recorded some of our friends reading scripts of the stuff we were reading, just for ourselves to help us pray. The more time we spent on it, our friends and family wanted to check it out. And over the course of a summer, some pretty crazy things started to happen in the lives of our friends and family, which led to us kind of really stepping back and saying, okay, God, like, do you want something from us?
Yeah, something's there. Yeah.
Got together, prayed about it as a group, discerned a pretty clear call to, like, go help the world pray, and walked in one Monday morning and quit my investing job to go help build a prayer app. So those first conversations around Lectio Divina were in the beginning of 2018, January, February. By the summer, our friends and family were using the things that we had kind of built for ourselves. By the fall, we quit our jobs, and by December of 2018, we launched in the App Store. So, and we've been super blessed since then. I think we just hit 25 million downloads.
Yeah, congratulations.
Grown a bunch. Yeah, it's been, praise be to God, it's been wild.
I saw right online, you hit like 1 billion prayers, right?
We are almost there.
You're almost there?
Mid 800 million prayers. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Wow. Well, yeah, I mean, first off, it's such a beautiful witness to the way the Lord will anoint a project, even when it's clearly discerned and done with him in mind. But also, I think part of your story ties in really well to, I was just sat down with John Cannon, who I know you're friends with. I sat down with him yesterday. That episode probably got released about 2 weeks ago now. But one thing he mentioned of great Catholic founders is that it rises from an organic need. That you guys were, you were kind of going down this path already of prayer and meditation, and then organically this need popped up of like, well, what about some sort of meditation app, but it's actually like a prayer app for and by Catholics. And yeah, I mean, how gracious the Lord has been in that endeavor is very cool to see.
Yeah, it was, we were talking a little bit about this. If you would have told us, obviously hindsight's 2020, and like we've been super, super blessed with all these like great what we would consider like vanity metrics of, downloads and
Yeah,
prayers
sure.
prayed and stuff. For us, it was really a like, go help people know me.
Mm.
And we literally said this out loud at the beginning, because if you would have told us, a month before launch or at launch that 1,000 people would ever use this like app to pray, we would have been like, there's no way. I mean, like 1,000 is such a crazy number. That's like, trying to envision like how many classrooms of people is that? It's like bigger than a big lecture hall. Like that just seems crazy. But if we spend the next couple years of our lives deplete all the like meager savings we have at the time and help one extra person arrive at a relationship with Christ, then like that's worth it. And so that was really the mindset of like, if we can just help one more person, because it was really informed by the experience we had over the previous summer of like, a handful of friends and family who like really started to have some meaningful connections. And like, if we can do another 5 people, help another 5 people come to know Christ. So it really started just that individual level of relationship. And that's how we approach the development of the app, the different building of the content. Obviously now we have a lot more people, which means we have to be a lot more intentional about creating a personalized experience, meeting each individual person where they're at. But for us, it's always about the next person, not about trying to hit some crazy like big stats.
And yeah, one thing you had mentioned last night about that I really thought was interesting, and part of why you guys were so successful in this endeavor by the vanity metrics of it is you were able to do all of this in a way that met people where they were at technologically, meaning like this wasn't some haphazardly coded app that was like kind of clunky and a little bit unnatural, and it was like, oh, once you get past the UI, then it's a good app. But you made something that was actually good and enjoyable to use. You said there was a lot of intentionality behind that reality, that necessity.
Yeah, totally. So, we always believed, particularly because at the beginning we thought, okay, nobody may use this thing, but if there's anybody that's going to use it, it's probably going to be people like us, young millennials, professional, working in busy lives or whatever. And we knew just intuitively and from our own experience, no matter how great the content of something might be, if it doesn't look and feel like something you would expect from Silicon Valley, whether, Instagram or Twitter or whatever else, people just aren't going to use it, particularly in our generation and younger, but even increasingly just the world. Like there's a certain level of expectation. So we thought about that, and we knew we never wanted to sacrifice on kind of the user experience quality. And so, as an investor, most companies that like pitch themselves have some version of a XY axis chart. We were talking about this. It's like, metric A, metric B, good, bad on each side. And everyone else in the world is either, in the upper left-hand corner or the bottom right-hand corner, meaning they're good at one thing but not the other thing, or vice versa. And we're going to be this thing that like brings these two worlds together. And for us, that was really great personalized spirituality in terms of helping people develop a prayer life, while also having world-class technology and user experience. And up until that point, I think most of the world could be described as great technology that was like actively trying to destroy your soul, or at least passively so, distract you, dopamine hits, all the social media stuff, or a bunch of great religious content, and not really through any intentional choice or dereliction of duty, but spending a lot of time on the content itself, and then just like not really knowing how to do the technology, or kind of making sacrifices on that end. And so we really didn't want to make sacrifices on either side, which is hard, right? It's more expensive, but that's something we were pretty committed to at the beginning. And so we always tried to, now, looking back at the first version of the app, we often like wince in pain at like, oh, that was so, basic and whatever. And you take an iterative approach, particularly in a startup. But that was something that was really important to us, and something that today continues to be feedback of, when people are encountering technology, especially technology that's associated with Catholicism, they come in and they're like, oh, wow, this looks good. This like feels natural.
Yeah.
It's often a accessible invitation, whereas they may not have experienced something like that. And so I think that particularly helps us reach people who are maybe not the already super passionate Catholics praying every day, going to mass a couple times a week. And so I don't think we talked about this yesterday, but one of the things we've seen happen is upwards of 35 to 40% of the users coming in the door today to Hallow do not primarily identify as Catholic, which is a massively bigger number than I would have expected.
Yeah.
For those who've never been in the app, you're going to see the the Pope's intentions, the Rosary, the saints. Where like I don't think there's any confusion that there are Catholic things in there, but I think the quality of the technological experience and the way we approach creating kind of a hopefully something approaching beautiful user experience allows people who maybe aren't already at the destination to start the journey. And from evangelization perspective, especially with schools, that's something that's really important to us.
Yeah, I think those Mark Wahlberg Let's Pray ads are really working to get people in there.
Yeah, I mean, with the celebrity stuff is certainly a part of that. Yeah.
I like your description of it almost as like a digital monstrance to say like this thing that we're giving you is so important that we're not going to neglect everything. We're not going to say, oh, this is so important, those things don't matter, because they do. You're going to say this thing is so important, everything else is worth elevating for this, which I think there's so much like larger scope life wisdom in that of like, if something is good or important, that means that you should elevate everything else around it, not that you should stop worrying about it. And in the context of this podcast, like with education, is like just because the content that you're teaching is good, and educators know this better than you or I do, even being that they're in the classroom. Like just because your content is good doesn't mean that you can just package it however you want and the students will digest it. And the way that you guys have done this, you started infusing Hallow into classrooms across the country, and in this good digital packaging, you've been able to give this great content to students in a way that is easily digestible and accessible.
100%. Yeah. I mean, one of the things I say in this topic is like, you're getting married, right? You're going to, I'm married, shout out my wife. And, but you're preparing for marriage. This is the person that loves you so much, they're going to commit to the rest of spending their life together through sickness and health, rich or poor, right?
Yeah, all of it.
In some ways you could look at that and say, okay, like they're committed. I don't need to try that hard. Like, I'll just wear sweats to my wedding day. Yeah. Like, no, like because you love the person, you want to give them your best, right? And you get the tux, clean shaven or at least a trimmed beard in my case, and get the hair done. Everything. Like because you love someone, you want to give them your best, not your worst. And so that's how we approach that fundamentally. In schools, it's been really interesting. So like I mentioned, we started about 6 years ago at the time of this recording. And for the first 2-ish years, 2.5 years, we were getting emails from Catholic school teachers every once in a while, principals, DREs of parishes, and saying, hey, I love the app, I've been using it. Do you mind if I use it in my classroom? And we were like, sure. Knock yourself out. Yeah, perfect. Let us know if you need anything. And so we just, we're like, let us know how it goes, whatever. So we'd get the occasional feedback that, people were liking it. We thought that was great. But as we grew, the frequency of those emails started to really increase over time to the point where, it was noticeable. And we started asking ourselves like, okay, maybe there's something specific we should be doing to help, Catholic schools. I'm the proud product of Catholic education from K through college. And, certainly wouldn't be the man I am today without the many amazing influences through Catholic education. And so we're like, okay, let's see if we can help. And so in classic kind of startup fashion, you don't know what you don't know. And so you just go start listening, asking questions. Yeah. Went to a couple Catholic educational conferences just to see what was going on. This was immediately post-COVID, kind of year into COVID. Okay. And so it struck me that there were at least 2 things going on in addition to all the COVID chaos. One was the disaffiliation challenge that the church was facing. Heard some of the stats that I never heard of before of like the median age of disaffiliation had come down to 13 years old, which is crazy, and often before people are fully catechized or confirmed. It's like, how do we create fundamentally an experience of catechesis that lasts a lifetime of discipleship? Is kind of like how we thought of that question. We looked at that and we're like, okay, well, that's kind of like Alex's life story of went through, CCD and Catholic college and, was told a lot of stuff, but it didn't stick. Like what was missing, and reflecting on that and, the experience we had in learning to pray, it was like, if you know all the what's, but not the who, the what's don't really matter. You don't have the context, right? If I gave you a bunch of like facts and figures about a potential, spouse or, dating partner, you can be like, okay, that's cool. Like maybe on paper they work or don't work, but like until you're in the room and you feel the vibe, as the kids would say, you can't really get to love. It's like, okay, that's certainly what we've experienced. And when you do fall in love with someone, then you want to get to know everything about them, right? So we developed this idea of the fundamental foundation of catechesis needs to be personal relationship with Christ. And it's in the context of that relationship that all the whats make sense. The second big thing was the increasingly dramatic mental health epidemic that was happening. Certainly was happening pre-COVID throughout the 2010s, but was exacerbated by COVID and the isolation and all the other disruptions to life. And we looked at that, and that was really like my life story around being super stressed, constantly connected, and all the issues that come with that. And reflecting on what I learned through that process of, more than anything, Christ extends an invitation to us, like, come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Like leading with the peace of our faith, and saying, we all have wounds. Some of us have very deep wounds, and many of them are not solvable by one another, and you're just at the physiological level. Ultimately, we need Christ as the divine physician and allow him to heal us, right? He is the source of true peace and goodness. And so we put these two pieces together. I'm like, those are kind of why we exist. And those are at a fundamental level. And those are the things where schools are really having these big questions. We said, okay, let's put together a Hallow for Schools program that's really built around an integrated view of spiritual and mental health that grounds the culture of your school in a culture of prayer and knowing Christ as both the foundation of catechesis and a source of peace for our lives. And so made up some slides, started cold outreach to some schools, got enough people to say yes, where we ended up putting the resources behind it to build it. That was a couple years, about 3.5 years ago now, and we have a couple dozen people working on it, a couple hundred schools across the country, and it's been really cool to spend time with. And I personally on the team have spent a lot of time around Catholic school kids and teachers and stuff, and so I'm happy to talk about some of those learnings. But that was kind of the why behind it, and it's been really fruitful.
And the what behind it is basically just infusing the Hallow app into the classroom. Where's that balance between like meeting the students where they're at, but also like, do we really need to be giving students another reason to be on an app or like a phone?
Yeah, super great question. We get this all the time, as you would imagine, from parents and principals, and
because it's issue number one. It's like that. If you ask any parent, like, what's the baseline issue? It's like, it's social media, it's apps, it's the phone. Like, get that out of there, and so many issues are solved. Yeah. So what's up with it? Yeah,
for sure. So I would say, first of all, those are very different things. Social media and a phone are like, there's a lot of difference between those two pieces of technology. At a super like basic statistical level, we had phones for a lot longer than we had social media, and the phones were not the problem. It was how we used the phones once social media started and became available on mobile devices in the early 2010s, that the stress and anxiety rates really started to climb. So having mobile phones did not really create an increase in a lot of the problems we're having today, just at a basic factual level. But yeah, philosophically, the way we approach it is a couple things. One, nobody needs an app to pray. So we're like very clear about that. Silence or prayer happens in the silence of our own hearts, and that fundamentally doesn't happen in an app. But in the same way that you don't need a gym membership or workout equipment or personal trainer to become physically fit, it can often be helpful to have those tools to help in learning or accountability or form or whatever the case is. Those can often be really helpful tools. Sure. Ultimately, they are a tool. You have to do the workout, but it gives you some support to kind of achieve the goal you already want to have that's independent of the things, of the tools. That's how we look at ourselves. We're a tool to help people learn to pray, kind of build the behavioral norms and habits around engaging in, daily prayer. But the prayer happens in your heart, and you don't need an app to do that.
Yeah.
The second thing, importantly, is that the pinnacle of anyone's prayer life, even those that love Hallow, is never going to be in Hallow. That happens at the altar, the source and summit of our faith.
Yeah, amen.
And so we're intentional both about we are unnecessary and we are ultimately oriented towards an end that's never going to be us. So we're like a very kind of limited scope in the middle. But we can be really helpful in starting the conversation and keeping the habits going that help us achieve the goals that we want to have of ultimately becoming saints. A couple ways we do that. So in the classroom, and you mentioned, what it feels like in a school, there's two flavors. We have like faculty and staff only kind of implementation, and then faculty, staff, and students. The full school is by far the most popular. As I'm sure you can imagine, every school is in a different place in terms of where they're at with their Catholic identity, what their focus is, what their needs are. And so we often spend a lot of time at the beginning just listening. Like, what are your needs? What are you focused on? What's the current, what are the charisms of the school? What's the current, spiritual practices of the school, and how we can be additive, because, we're not the main show. We're the support to the local relationships of the school. And so, some schools are at a place where they're trying to maybe refocus on their Catholic identity for the first time in a while. That looks a little bit different than if they're really trying to double down and go deeper in the faith. But fundamentally, we've learned a couple things. One is a lot of people that struggle with prayer or are not really open to prayer or don't try and pray is they feel like, oh, I know what prayer is. That's like the thanks for stuff, sorry for stuff, help me with stuff. And like I do that, and I basically feel like I'm talking to a wall, and like I know prayer, and prayer doesn't, quote unquote, like work for me.
Yeah, it's kind of a checkbox, touch the base, I'm done with it.
Yeah. Or like, I know prayer. Prayer equals the Our Father, and like that's the only thing I know. Like need to know, whatever. We try and help those people understand that prayer is just like our communication with anyone else in different context. Like all communication is contextual, from like marketing's comms class or whatever. How we talk to one another depends on who the person is, our relationship with them, what stage of life we're in, the context. Like the way we're talking here with mics in front of us are different than I would talk to my 2.5-year-old who's potty training, and that's different than I would talk to my friends online playing Call of Duty, right? Like the context really matters. So you need to be able to communicate differently and listen differently. For the teachers, we talk about like the 5 love languages. We each have a tendency to give and receive love in different ways. Understanding that is really important to be able to create harmony in a relationship. And the same is true with our relationship with God. We talk differently to one another depending on the context. And so we really try and help people think about prayer as a toolbox, not as a hammer. And finding the tool that's right for you in the moment. Maybe that's Lectio Divina, maybe that's the Examen, maybe that's the Rosary, maybe that's contemplative prayer, maybe it's something totally different. And that really often opens the door to, oh, I didn't know prayer could like be with like this. This was like one of the most common quotes we get from students, especially like personal, engaging, like relevant, personal. And so that's maybe one of the biggest learning by cracking open all that prayer is having a relationship, and realize you can have a relationship in a lot of different ways, that people really can see God for the first time through their own eyes of their heart, which is really powerful or empowering. The second big thing is, then we're always oriented towards the sacraments, right? So for the school perspective, the more you spend time listening and thinking to God, the more you're both going to want to spend time with him in a deeper way, i.e. the sacraments, and less time spending the other things. So I was at a Catholic school at the beginning of last year, high school, senior, tight end, being recruited by like D1 schools.
Wow.
And big football guy. And he's like, hey man, are you the app guy? I was like, yes. I was like nervous now.
Yes, sir.
And he's like, hey, I just want to say thanks. You helped me figure it out. I was like, I don't figure what out? He said, the meaning of life. I was like, okay, what? Like, is this a joke? Is this a TikTok? Like, what's happening? I was like, well, like, tell me more. I'm going to stop doing the football impersonation. But he's like, I was super stressed. I had all my schoolwork, football work. At the end of the day, I was just like, couldn't stop thinking about stuff. I ended up scrolling on TikTok or playing Fortnite until like 2 or 3 in the morning. My sleep was getting worse. I was doing work at school, worse at football. It was just this vicious cycle in my life. And so, they made us download this app. And one night I was just really struggling. It was like 11 o'clock. And I said, well, I gave this a shot. I heard they have these like Bible sleep stories, like end your day in scripture. And he said, I did that. I was asleep within 10 minutes. And I had like the best night of sleep I had in a long time. And so I was like, whoa, I want more of this. And so I started praying in the morning when I woke up, and then at night when I got back. Instead of 5 hours of sleep, he started getting 8 hours of sleep, and he was praying every day. His priorities came back in line. I was like, so, like, what's the meaning of life? Like, what'd you learn? He's like, doesn't really matter, like, what I think I need or what my priorities are. All I got to do is wake up every day and ask him what he wants, and then just do that. And that's, like, a really freeing thing. I was like, okay, I couldn't have said it better myself. If the football thing doesn't work out, come to us and we'll hire you on the marketing team.
I'm being the new spokesperson of Hallow. Yeah,
exactly.
Wow, it's a beautiful potency of like meeting a student where they're at in such a way of like you know how to use an app, you have a phone, you know what these things look like, but this is a totally new way of using it. I almost think it's helpful to think about it as if like praying is almost like I'm visiting a new country I've never been to. And Hallow is like, oh cool, I'm a tour guide. Like I know this place. I know what's going on around here. And end of the day, when you leave there, you're not going to be like, man, Austria was sick. This tour guide was so interesting. You're going to say, man, Austria is so interesting. And there's an asterisk of like, oh, thanks to this tour guide who knew what was going on. And one day you might not need that. But if you've never been there before, then it's so confusing. And you're getting a tour guide who speaks a language that most students and most kids are speaking, this language of technology, hours a day. Like something that they're so used to.
I love that. I don't want to get thrown out of the building, but if we could also hire you on our marketing team. We'll do a little wear two hats here. Yeah, I love that.
It's like, it's just so cool. I love actually meeting people where they're at. I think oftentimes that term gets a little bit misused or thrown around, kind of as an excuse to not do anything, or an excuse to do what you want to do. Of like, oh no, like I don't want to go to the club. I'm just meeting my friend where they're at. And it's like, no, dude, like no, you're not. And I think it could be easy to conflate that with Hallow of like, yeah, sure, you get to say you're meeting them where you're at because you have the convenience of having a very successful app that is a hot market right now of like apps. Apps are hot. Like people download a bunch of apps. But then there's this asterisk of like, no, we actually do like want to elevate people. Like there's an actual root of mission that there's a guy, this John Candy stuff is fresh in my mind, but this idea of like, it's built on a firm foundation of a relationship with God and a knowledge of yourself and the world around you in a way that actually means that meeting them where they're at takes them where they need to be.
100%. Yeah, it's a couple thoughts you just triggered. I agree that like meeting people where they're at has become very much a buzzword, and like all buzzwords become overused.
It makes my eyes roll in the back of my head when someone says they're meeting someone where they're at.
We have a slide in our school's deck. It's like we try and do this in two very specific ways, meeting people where they're at. Mm-hmm. One is literally and physically where people are spending their time. Yeah. Which is on the mobile phones. Like, like that is a fact. That is a reality. Yeah. Like, let's go there and start the conversation. The second is that at a metaphysical level, people at different parts of the spiritual journey, like fundamentally are prepared for and need like different things. Mm-hmm. And so the ability for digital technology to be able to become really personalized at that fundamental level is something we take really seriously. At the same time, where you start the journey is never like definitionally where you should end the journey. Mm-hmm. And so we have this metaphor of, in the same way, like the post-war era, people were really congregate around cities, living closer together. I live in Chicago now. You have at least like closely packed city, neighborhoods. Over the last 50 years, people have really like moved out to different suburbs, living in different areas. And there was a huge issue, traffic, all these things. Mm. And one of the things that needed to change about the infrastructure of how we, I'm doing air quotes, like commute into the heart of the city, needed to change by building new interstate systems, new on-ramps into these new communities where people are living. Mm. I think what we're trying to do is build those on-ramps in new places, leading with the peace of our faith, leading with the personal relationship, in these places, spiritual but not religious, whatever the case is, that didn't really exist before and so didn't really need specific on-ramps. But nobody gets to their destination on the on-ramp. Like you need to go onto the main highway and end up at the heart of the city of God in this case, being at the altar. And so we recognize that it is a journey, and we do like see that empirically. So one of the things about being a digital thing is we can like, what happens, what do people do? Mm-hmm. It's one thing to say we want to start meeting them where they're at and then like hopefully get them somewhere else, but like do we actually do that? Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things is that people start by choosing relatively short sessions on the app, probably average like 4 or 5 minutes. Over time that drifts upwards. Oh. So the more they start building the relationship, then they want to go deeper, spend more time with God, right? So that says something. Our lowest usage days of the week, you want to take a guess? Interactive podcast time?
I really hope that you say it's Sundays. That would mean a lot to me.
Yeah, it is Sundays. It is Sundays, yeah. Yes. So the number one day is Monday. Number two is a little less. Wednesday's a little less. Thursday a little. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then Monday's back up again. Wow. And so we were a little nervous, and we would get questions from priests and principals like, okay, if they start using this app, are they going to stop wanting to go to church? Back to the metaphor of falling in love and dating, I was like, I don't think so. Like the more you love someone, the more you want to spend time with them, not like the less. Mm-hmm. And so that has really proven out that people start building a daily prayer habit. They want to go to church. I often tell people it's not illegal to bring headphones in and like sit in church and use Hallow and adoration or a mass, but you certainly don't need to. So I'm fine with Sunday being the lowest day. But like, okay, this is the week. I want to stay in relationship with Christ the rest of the week. Monday, boom, big day. And then, throughout the week, people, get tired or whatever.
Yeah. I like this analogy of the on-ramps. Because oftentimes when I'm thinking about what it means to meet someone where they're at, I feel like it's very similar to this analogy of like, if I'm going to, let's say we're both going to dinner. Dinner is heaven. And it's like, oh, cool. Like, I'll come pick you up, dude. Like, where are you? I'll meet you at your house. If I do that and then I get out of my car and walk into your house and move in with you for a month, it's like we didn't go to dinner. I never took you anywhere. Like, meeting someone where they're at is only good so long as you take them to the place that they need to get taken.
Yep.
And if you spend too long where they are, you're just getting comfortable with them. You're not actually taking them anywhere. But in the same way, it's like you're building these on-ramps to say, like, it's a clear sign, like it's a clear roadmap. Like, you're here. If you're not sure where to go, like, hop on and we'll help you get there. And it's funny when you say that the end goal ultimately isn't Hallow, because there is kind of a funny paradox of like, if someone uses Hallow enough, then at a certain point they'll kind of be like, oh, maybe I don't need Hallow anymore. Like, I just know how to pray now without an app. And it's just a very funny paradox, I'm sure, between like, it's very helpful to start, and then eventually you're kind of like, all right, cool. Like, I have a prayer life now. I know how to do personal mental prayer, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I just wrote about this the other day of like, look, if you do Hallow and after a year you're like, great, I figured it out, I'm gonna have a relationship with God, I don't need Hallow anymore. Like, we're super excited about that. Yeah. We have grown, because I think one of the other things we've learned is that the more people start with a personal relationship, building that in personal mental prayer and things like the Rosary or Lectio Divina, they tend to then want to also grow in more understanding, right? So back to the who before what, starting with the who actually makes you want to know more what.
Sure.
And so we've added more relationship. Exactly. So like, we've added actually quite a bit more catechetical and exegetical content. So some people that may be coming every day to start for the Rosary or Lectio Divina end up maybe not using that every day, or maybe they do, but then they pick up Bible in a year, or we have a daily exegesis on the daily gospel to learn, or we have a daily reflection from Jeff Cavins, or
Cardinal Seraph.
Yeah, exactly.
Great,
yeah. So you might be coming for different things, right? You built the prayer habit part. Now you're doing more learning stuff, right? So there's something for everyone. To use your metaphor of like the picking someone up from dinner, which I love, you might argue like, oh, don't use a car, like walk, like that's better for you. Or like, oh, do we need to use the phones maybe to do that? Yeah. I was talking to someone last week, and he made a comment that Pope Benedict XVI created the first papal Twitter account. And in reflecting on like why do that, like why engage with social media, even though he didn't really like understand it from a user perspective, in his reflection he said, I look at the internet and social media as being like the ancient Roman roads. They were originally used to conquer, subjugate people, and impose Roman rule and stamp out other faiths from the world. But the creation of those roads allowed and were then used by St. Paul and many of the other missionary saints to go out to redeem those roads by bringing the gospel and bringing the good news to all those people. And so to reclaim the Roman roads to sanctification as opposed from persecution is what we are looking to do, the information superhighway of the internet and social media. And so that's how we think about it. It's the tool that is currently really bringing us, in many cases, away from a deeper relationship with God. Let's reclaim those and rewire our relationship with them so that they help sanctify us. And I think we see that back to the high school football player. The more he used Hallow, the less he used all of the other things on the app, and like his net time on the phone went down and brought like the time he did use towards sanctification away from distraction or whatever else. We actually just did with our partner schools, this partnership with Humanality, which is an amazing nonprofit focusing on right relationship with technology, a 28-day digital detox run through the phone. And so it's very, paradoxical in that way. But it was really about letting go of technology, using 5 to 10 minutes of like the phone. And if you end up at the end of those 28 days, like getting rid of your smartphone, going to flip phone and having a better relationship with technology, great. We're happy to help serve that part of the journey.
Yeah. That's, I mean, this episode kind of morphed into, I think it's a really, you kind of, how I think provides a masterclass of what it means to meet someone where they're at. And as an educator, not me as an educator, but as listeners, educators, like that's kind of the job of any formator of young people, is like, how do we meet young people where they're at? And here's another way, is like, just meet them where they're at, use technology, use their phones in a way that brings them onto these new Roman roads, that brings them into this forum, and from there can get carried to a relationship with God.
Amen.
Yeah. I think that's about as good of a place to wrap it up as I could ask for. Thank you so much again for being willing to come on today. This was wonderful. It's such a treat. So thank you.
This was awesome. My pleasure. It was a great conversation.
To end every podcast, we clap at the same time.
Okay.
So we are out.